What if I told you that pornography and daily masturbation could quietly rewire your brain, not building pleasure, but trapping you in loops that leave you less fulfilled and more disconnected than ever? Most men never realize what's really happening until it's already affecting their focus, their relationships, and even their long-term sexual health. In today's video, I'm going to break down the science behind how your brain responds to porn and self-pleasure. What really happens with dopamine and oxytocin, and most importantly, what you can do to protect yourself and take back control. I'm Dr. Nora Blake, a board-certified urologist, and my mission is to bring you evidence-based answers about your sexual health so you can stay confident, connected, and in charge of your body. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop a quick comment with your age or the decade you were born in and where you're watching from. It's the easiest way for me to understand who's here and to keep bringing you insights that truly matter. And of course, make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss out on the knowledge that could change the way you think about your health, one video at a time. Let me start with a warning that many people don't want to hear: pornography and masturbation are not as harmless to your brain as you've been led to believe. Science shows a very clear difference in how the brain responds depending on the type of sexual stimulation. Watching porn lights up certain regions, yes, but only at a modest level. The moment you touch yourself, brain activity shoots up several times higher. And when that touch comes from a partner, the response is more powerful, still tapping into fibers in the skin that only fire when another human hand makes contact at just the right rhythm. No device, no screen, no solo stimulation can replicate this. That's the catch. Porn tricks the brain into thinking it's experiencing real reward while offering nothing close to the power of human connection. Over time, the brain can start to settle into these artificial loops, craving more screen-driven novelty while feeling less fulfilled. It's an illusion of stimulation, one that creates a cycle that's difficult to break. Which raises the deeper question: why is the brain so quick to get trapped in these artificial pleasure loops in the first place? The answer lies in how our brain learns what pleasure even means. Early experiences cut deep, carving the patterns that shape what we later find arousing. Neuroscientists call this process imprinting. When the first sexual encounters are genuinely pleasurable, the brain tags those moments and begins to build a template of attraction, a kind of love map. Dopamine drives the motivation and action, while oxytocin links those feelings to bonding with another person. Together, they create the foundation for what becomes desirable. But if those early encounters are frustrating, unfulfilling, or even negative, the brain can misinterpret intimacy itself as disappointing. That's how someone might struggle to enjoy healthy sex later because the initial programming was flawed. The twist, though, is that the brain is not fixed. Positive new experiences can reshape those old imprints. When something deeply pleasurable happens, the brain updates the map, rewiring what it pursues and expects. That adaptability is powerful, but it also explains why our first encounters matter so much. And it leads naturally to a larger force behind all of this: dopamine, not as the chemical of pleasure, but as the fuel for pursuit. Most people think of dopamine as the brain's happiness chemical, but that's wrong. Dopamine is not about reward itself, it's about the drive to seek it. When I feel drawn toward something or someone, it's dopamine pushing me to move closer. When I sense danger or discomfort, dopamine also helps me pull away. It connects my emotional brain with the frontal lobe, allowing me to focus and act with purpose. This is why when I'm captivated by a new partner, I can't stop thinking about them. Dopamine is fueling that pursuit. It's the same system that keeps me chasing a goal, a craving, or a fantasy. The misunderstanding comes from thinking dopamine equals pleasure. It doesn't. It's more like the gasoline that powers the engine of desire, motivating me to take steps toward what I find rewarding. And this misunderstanding sets up the next myth we need to dismantle: the belief that orgasm unleashes a huge explosion of dopamine. The truth is far more surprising. Desire often seems to come out of nowhere, a scent in the air, a flash of attraction, a memory triggered. Testosterone plays a role here, but not in the simple way people assume. It's not a straight line where more testosterone means more desire. Instead, the brain operates like two faucets running at once, one hot, one cold. Excitatory signals push toward arousal. Inhibitory signals hold it back, and the balance determines what I feel. Dopamine rises during the buildup as motivation grows and attention narrows, but at the moment of climax, it doesn't explode. It actually drops. That's the reversal almost nobody expects. For years, people have imagined orgasm as the ultimate dopamine flood, but research shows the opposite. Orgasm is not a chemical firework, it's the resolution of a buildup where dopamine levels dip rather than peak. This flips our common understanding and forces us to look at what's really happening in the brain just before that moment of release. Right before climax, the brain enters a fascinating zone that explains why delaying orgasm can feel so intensely pleasurable. In this state, alpha brain waves spike, cognitive control loosens, and sensory focus sharpens. It's almost meditative, like slipping into a flow state where time and thought blur away. The nervous system synchronizes in unusual ways, creating a harmony across brain regions that looks strangely close to what scientists see during a seizure. Except here, instead of dysfunction, it produces heightened pleasure and focus. This paradox, neural activity that mimics instability but results in ecstasy, is what makes edging so compelling. Holding yourself at the edge keeps the brain in this rare state longer, stretching out the sensation and magnifying the reward. It's a reminder that sexual pleasure is as much about the brain's rhythm as the body's. But of course, the question still remains, what finally happens when I let go and orgasm actually takes over? When orgasm arrives, the hypothalamus steps forward like the brain's command center, unleashing a cascade of signals. Oxytocin floods in, binding me more closely to my partner and amplifying feelings of intimacy. The reward system stamps the experience with emotional importance. Remember this, repeat. This while dopamine levels fall back from their arousal peak. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of my brain that governs decision-making, effectively shuts down. That's why sex can make people act without hesitation or second thought. The gatekeeper of reason is momentarily off duty. At the same time, the cerebellum orchestrates the body's physical climax, directing the pelvic floor muscles to contract rhythmically at precise intervals about every 0.8 of a second before gradually spacing out. It's a dance of hormones and motor signals, perfectly timed yet outside conscious control. The irony is sharp. At the very moment when choices and consequences matter most, the brain flips the switch and silences the voice of reason. And from here, another question naturally emerges: if this is how the brain handles climax, then what does it mean for claims about multiple orgasms, especially in women? In the lab, I've seen women report multiple orgasms, claiming wave after wave of climax, yet the physiological data often tells a different story. The gold standard for defining orgasm isn't just the feeling, it's the unmistakable pelvic floor contractions, 8 to 12 pulses, spaced at precise intervals that gradually lengthen before fading. That's the body's biological signature of climax. What researchers discovered is that many women who believed they were experiencing multiple orgasms weren't showing these contractions more than once. Instead, they seemed to be riding repeated surges of arousal, lingering near the peak, then climbing again without actually triggering the body's stereotypical orgasm pattern. It's not dishonesty. It's the brain's subjective perception of being at the top more than once. And that gap between lived experience and physiological evidence reminds us how complex sexuality is. It's not just biology, it's interpretation. Which naturally brings us to the question of what happens after the high point. Because if climax ends in a wave of release, it's what happens in the quiet moments right afterward that can decide the strength of a relationship. Cuddling is not just sweet, it's a neurobiological act of bonding. After orgasm, the brain is swimming in a cocktail of oxytocin and dopamine, primed to form attachments. If I stay close, if I rest against my partner, if our faces are near each other, the brain starts filing away that person as mine. This is what scientists call post-orgasmic learning. Experiments in animals show that when a male rat is allowed to remain with his partner during the refractory period after ejaculation, he learns to prefer her. Remove her too quickly, and that partner preference never develops. Humans are no different. When two people stay close after sex, sometimes, even in what began as a casual hookup, falling asleep next to each other, waking up together, sharing breakfast, the brain quietly cements a bond that can grow into a relationship. Oxytocin isn't only about affection, it's also tied to jealousy. If that bond is disrupted, if closeness is denied, the brain feels the loss sharply. So cuddling isn't a trivial detail. It's the invisible glue that transforms fleeting encounters into something more meaningful. And yet, in today's world with porn only a click away, many fear this bonding system is under attack. Is pornography really destroying our ability to connect? This is where the myths need to be cleared. The common fear is that watching pornography dulls real attraction, leaving people numb to their partners. But research shows the opposite pattern in many cases. Those who watch more porn often report higher arousal with their partners, not less. That doesn't mean there are no risks. Pornography can inject novelty into a sex life, which helps fight boredom. But when the imagery is too extreme or too intense, it can overshadow real intimacy. Real-life sex may start to feel flat by comparison. That's the danger zone when the screen becomes more stimulating than the touch of another person. Even then, the science is consistent. Direct touch, especially from a partner, activates the brain at levels no video can match. The so-called super stimulus of porn still loses to the biology of human touch. The red flag comes when someone notices that porn use is making real intimacy less enjoyable or harder to maintain. That's the moment to seek guidance from a urologist or sex therapist, not to bury the issue in shame. But if shame itself is the bigger weight on your shoulders, is the answer really to quit everything cold turkey? Too many men come to me convinced the only way forward is absolute abstinence, zero porn, zero masturbation, zero tolerance. At first, it sounds disciplined, but in practice it often breeds misery. People report shame spirals, crushing guilt, even thoughts of self-harm when they relapse, which sometimes means nothing more than a nocturnal emission they had no control over. That's not recovery, that's punishment. Neuroscience and psychology both tell us that abstinence-only approaches rarely work. They turn sexuality into a battlefield of guilt. A far healthier alternative is acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, which helps people align their behaviors with their core values instead of fighting their own biology. The focus shifts from forbidding the act to addressing the shame underneath it. Because here's the real loop that damages the brain: shame leads to compulsive behavior, which leads to more shame, which then fuels the cycle all over again. Breaking that loop requires compassion, not condemnation. And that realization takes us to the most important message of all: that sexual curiosity and diversity aren't something to fear, they're something to understand and manage wisely. At the end of the day, curiosity and variety are not signs of weakness or corruption, they're part of being human. As long as my choices are safe, consensual, and not pulling me away from the responsibilities and relationships that matter, there is nothing inherently destructive about pleasure or even about porn. What does the real damage is misunderstanding shame and misinformation. When I understand how dopamine fuels pursuit, how oxytocin forges bonds, how early experiences shape my sexual map, I'm no longer a passenger, I'm the driver. I can make informed choices that align with my values and my life. The real warning is not that masturbation or pornography will automatically destroy my brain, but that myths and guilt can. Knowledge frees me to take back control. And that's the takeaway: when you strip away the fear, when you respect the science, and when you place your own brain back in the driver's seat, you realize sexuality doesn't have to be a source of anxiety. It can be a source of strength, connection, and joy. And from here, we can keep exploring the practical strategies that strengthen intimacy, manage habits, and allow the brain's most powerful organ, our mind, to work for us, not against us.